I want to welcome everyone. My name is Matt Reyna. I am the affiliate coordinator for CDSS. I help steward a network of over 275 affiliate organizations across the US and Canada, folk music and dance organizations of all different kinds. We offer our affiliates group liability insurance, 501(c)(3) support, quarterly e-newsletters, and special access to our camp programs and way more. Our affiliate year runs from May 1st to April 30th, and our renewal period is coming up during April. So if you're already an affiliate, you'll be hearing from me. And if you'd like to join, you can just visit us at cdss.org/affiliates. Um, well,
Oh, good. Let's see.
Susan, if you want to start screen sharing, that could be good.
Sure. Let me just make sure here that can everyone, if you can't see the slide there, just holler in the chat.
Susan, I think I'm seeing your presenter view.
Are you? Uh-oh. Why is that happening? Let's try. How's that?
Very good. That's great.
Okay, great. Great.
So the first half of CDSS's mission states that we connect and support people in building and sustaining vibrant communities through participatory dance, music, and song. And part of that support includes cultivating resources such as this toolkit for our affiliate members and all of our constituency, really. So as you can see, we've already had some great online programming this year, including this program. And we've got more to come. We've got a regular Contra Callers Corner. That's just sort of an informal chat surrounding a loose topic that's happening every month. And we're gonna start having a regular series for organizers as well. So please stay tuned to all that we're doing. And in terms of this program, we've worked with Pat MacPherson and Susan Creighton to bring you this step-by-step resource for archiving your organization or your team's past through their stories, documents, and mementos. So Susan and Pat will be offering more in-depth programming surrounding that in the fall. You'll hear more about that from them. But let's go ahead and introduce our lovely speakers. Susan, can you advance the slide?
Sure. Yep.
So we've got Susan Creighton in Greenfield, Mass. Susan is a retired professional archivist, having worked most recently as the associate archivist for Vermont Folklife. She's been a Morris dancer, a contra dancer, and an English dancer, as well as playing for both contra and English dances. And she's joined by Pat MacPherson. Pat's our retired director of education here at CDSS, and she was a lead interviewer collecting oral histories during the CDSS 100th anniversary. She's been a Scottish dancer and English dancer for many years, as well as an accomplished dance musician. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to our presenters for our quick start guide to the archiving toolkit.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for joining, and a special hello to Canadian friends I see here joining us tonight. So thank you one and all. We've got lots of North America represented, which feels good. I just wanted to just give you a quick rundown of what we're going to try and do this evening. We're going to start off with just a very brief overview of what the toolkit is. Then we'll go into sort of a short history. How did this toolkit come into being and why now? And then we'll just talk a little bit about some assumptions underlying the resource to help you decide if it's right for you or not. We'll spend a bunch of time talking about the structure of the toolkit, and then we have invited some representatives from two of the four Morris teams that actually field tested the materials, and they can talk to you a little bit about where they are in their process of using it. As Matt mentioned, we'll talk about an upcoming opportunity to actually get to use the toolkit with guidance from me and Pat as sort of a series of fall workshops. And then we'll have a Q&A session at the end and then any final announcements. So let me just tell you a little bit then about this toolkit. So it is first and foremost designed to be kind of a do-it-yourself set of resources to provide guidance for you on how to preserve your folk organization's history. The materials in the toolkit can really serve several different kinds of purposes, and one of those sets of purposes is around the idea of preservation. So let's say, for example, you're part of a dance organization that's been performing dances done by your grandparents and great-grandparents, and you want to make sure that these dances are not lost. You could use these materials to help you figure out how to preserve that repertoire. Or you might be part of a performing group that has a number of older members and then a crop of perhaps newer, younger members. And as the older members are aging out of the group, you may want to make sure that what's distinctive about your group is not lost. So these materials can help you preserve stories, pictures, information to share with the younger members about the group's history. You also might just be very interested in simply adding to the general body of knowledge about your particular type of folk music or song or dance. For example, we initially focused this around Morris teams, and a lot of the Morris teams that were starting up in the US in the 1970s relied heavily on material such as Roy Dommett's notes to help them understand the traditions and really to build their dance styles and their teams. So anything you can preserve now can help support dance and song in the future. Another set of purposes is around providing access. I know in some cases we've talked to folks who are the person in their organization who's been the keeper of the team history for a long time, and it's sitting in their closet at home somewhere. And you may have a mix of things. Some of it may be online. Some of it might be being held by a couple of team historians. It might be in bags, in boxes, whatever. Well, these materials could help you make it easier for other team members to look through that material without having to go to your house and search through the bags and the boxes that are there. And our final set of purposes is around education. So perhaps you are in a folk song organization, let's say, that's collected a large repertoire of a certain genre of songs. These materials could help you make it available to others who are interested in the same genre and who might carry on the collection and the performance of these songs. So all three of these purposes are pretty closely intertwined, and the toolkit's designed to address all of those. So kind of in a rough structure, the toolkit is divided into 6 chapters, and each chapter has several videos and then some accompanying PDFs that have reference information or checklists or transcripts of the videos or just kind of a Cliff Notes summary of the key information that's in there. We've also tried to give you the information you need without getting too bogged down in some of the more esoteric aspects of archiving material. Me as the retired archivist, I leaned heavily on Pat to help me not get too jargony in my nerding out about archives here. But we really assume no prior knowledge of any library, museum, or archives work. That said, if you do have someone in your organization who has that kind of professional experience, by all means, get them on board because they will be really, really useful. But really, regardless of whether you have that person or those people, the materials are intended to guide you through the process without needing that. All right, so that's kind of the quick overview. We'll get into a more detailed breakdown of it, but next I'm going to turn it over to Pat to tell you a little bit about how the toolkit came into being and how we've ended up where we are. So, Pat, over to you.
Okay, now I'm unmuted. Hi, everyone. Um, Susan and I started working together in 2017, just as I was about to retire from CDSS. And we've known one another for years and, just ended up with this synergistic group of interests and skills I came from working at CDSS as a book editor, and I also started the oral history project there. And Susan was coming from a teaching and archiving background. And we decided to call our little business Narratus. And in 2018, we started identifying our goals. By 2019, we had done a couple of pilot projects, and Rachel Diamondstone, who was the squire of the Marlborough Morris Ale in Marlborough, Vermont, came to us and said, Marlborough is celebrating its 50th anniversary in 2025. Would you like to create an archive? So we discussed it, and we thought this is a great opportunity to preserve the history of North American Morris. The ale took place at a time when many people were first encountering ritual dance and Morris in North America. And the teams that came to the early years of the ale are now celebrating their 50th anniversaries. So by creating an archive, we would have a chance to talk to those people who came to those first ales and record them, and thereby creating a history. By 2020, Susan and I had by then talked to the Morris Ale Committee. They conveyed to us that they were really most interested in stories, which made my heart happy. And it turns out they really didn't know what was going to be involved with creating an archive. I'm not sure what exactly they thought, but as Susan mentioned, I was unschooled in making archives, but she taught me everything I know. So the Ale Committee gave us their view of what the archive should contain: the stories, collecting art and posters, and really records of the evolution of the ale from its beginnings. While we were, pulling this project together, we realized we were going to need support, and we reached out to CDSS. After conversations with Katie German, she asked if we would expand our work to create a set of resources with which CDSS could support Morris teams across North America. And we soon realized the materials didn't have to be Morris specific, but we could use them for any folk-related organization that wanted to preserve its history. So working part-time, but very hard, between 2021 and 2025, Susan and I created an archive. It is now online. We unveiled it at the Marlborough Ale 2025 at their 50th anniversary. And you can find it online at the Marlborough Morris Ale website. And between 2023 and 2024, we created the first draft of the toolkit. We showed it to Katie and Joanna Reiner Wilkinson, who was then program director at CDSS. They gave us great feedback, and we went back and started again. And they also suggested that we send the toolkit out for field testing, which we thought was a great idea. Susan and I recruited 4 teams to go through the materials. They were, we selected Ring a Bells, a team in New York City that had just celebrated their 50th anniversary, King Sessing Morris in Philadelphia, another very well-established team that has a huge archive of, or huge collection of videos and quite a large collection of physical objects related to some of their Morris activities. Minnesota Traditional Morris in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Sound and Fury Morris in Seattle. And we're We're going to hear from Jane and Dan from Sound and Fury later on, and from Larry from Minnesota Traditional Morris as well. So we're really interested to see what they're going to say about their experience of field testing. When we were writing the toolkit, we had some basic assumptions, and we wrote it in response to working with the Marvel Morris Ale, and the examples that we have given throughout the toolkit focus on dance, but the materials are adaptable to any kind of folk organization in many different contexts, whether you have a song circle, a rapper team, or a long-running dance series. We also designed the resources with some basic assumptions. One is that we're assuming that you want your collection to last in perpetuity, or at least for a very long time. We assume that you'll be making your collection available to the public, and this may mean simply to the members of your Morris team or your folk organization, or it could be made available to the broader public. We also assume that when you create an archive, you create possibly digital copies of something physical, like a document or a photograph, and you keep the original. You'll be keeping originals as a safeguard to anything happening to digital copies. So that's a bit of our history, a very short version of the history of how we created the Marble Ale archive, and using that, we created the toolkit.
All right. Thank you, Pat. Okay, so next, now I'm going to delve into some detail about what the structure of the toolkit is, so you know exactly kind of how we've put this together. So we've divided the toolkit, as we said, into 6 chapters, and each of these chapters really focuses on what we've defined as one part of the overall process. It's pretty important to go through these chapters in order because we wrote it on the assumption that you have the information from all the preceding chapters in any particular chapter. It really does build cumulatively. Chapter 1 outlines a number of really important questions for you to think about in order to be successful with your archiving project. So that is definitely the starting point there. Chapters 2 through 5 include 3 or 4 videos each. There will always be a video that's an introduction, a quick introduction to the chapter. There will be a video that kind of summarizes a bunch of background information, kind of like here's what you need to know before you start working on this part of it. And then the third video is really the how-to. It's a guide to the concrete steps you need to take for that part of the process. And in most cases, those steps are outlined in a spreadsheet that we'll provide for you. And if you go through the videos in that order, intro, background information, and how to, then you will be in great shape. So in addition to the videos, each chapter includes some accompanying PDF documents. The PDFs could be one of any number of things. They include transcripts of the video. They include summaries of the key information from the video so that you don't have to take notes when you're listening to this whole video. They might also include checklists, reference sheets, or other kinds of tools to use as you're implementing that steps of archiving the process. So I am happy to say it is now up on the CDSS website. So if you go to the CDSS website, but don't do it yet, you'll look under the resources tab that's there on the home page and go down to where it says resource portal. You'll click on resource portal and you scroll down there, and then on the left under that search box, if you go down to where it says for an audience of organizers, if you click on that, that will filter your search. You could also just as easily type the word toolkit in the search window there, or archiving or something like that, and you will get the CDSS Archiving Toolkit come up. And then if you click on that, dun, 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 you will see something that looks like this. This is each one of the videos will look like this as you scroll down. This is an example of where you begin actually, which is the overview. There's sort of a short overview you watch first before you dive into chapter 1. And then if you look off to the right, that's where any of the PDFs are that go with that chapter. So chapter 1, planning for your archival collection. In this chapter, we're going to talk about establishing goals for your archival collection. This is actually really important to spend a little bit of time thinking about, why are we bothering to do this? What are we hoping will happen to this thing once it's created? Because your thoughts and your answers to that are going to influence a lot of your future decisions about what directions you go with building your collection. We'll also talk about, if you have the luxury of assembling a small team of people to do it with you, we'll talk about assembling your team, or how to handle it if you're just on your own doing it. We'll talk about setting a realistic timeline. We also talk about common misconceptions about archives and archival collections. There are many. And we'll then walk you through a series of important planning questions they're intended to kind of help set the direction of your particular archiving project. So just as an example, here's one of the resources that goes with chapter 1, where we've walked you through a bunch of planning questions in the video, and then we just summarized a couple of pages of all the planning questions in a PDF. So some of our field testers actually wrote out answers to these. Others used them as discussion questions just with each other. Others brought them to team meetings and discussed them with the whole team. So you can use them in whatever way you feel like works best for your situation. Chapter 2 is all about setting up a system to receive donations. Now, this is about donations of material for your archival collection. It's really for those of you who are going to be collecting archival material or adding to what you already have. We should clarify that we're going to be using the words donations and donor a lot through these resources. And when we do that, we're talking about donations of material to your collection. And the people that are giving you that material, we're not talking about financial contributions to you or to CDSS or anything like that. Although I'm sure CDSS always loves financial contributions. But this part of the chapter really talks to you about the part of the process now where you're going to talk to people about donating material to your archival collection. And again, that is if you are going to add new material to your collection. You know, you might actually be a group that already has everything you want for your team's history and you don't need to, or you don't want to add any additional material. But if you do plan to add material, this chapter guides you through what you need to know about having those conversations. If you're not going to do that, you can kind of gloss over the part about the conversations and pay attention to the part about just setting up the system to make sense of everything you've got. So a lot of people have only vague notions about really what an archive is and how archival collections work. So part of what you need to do in your conversations with people is just educate them a little bit on what you're creating, on what it means to donate something to it, and how they're going to be able to access the material once it's ready. So this chapter is also about keeping track of all the material and keeping it organized as it's coming in. So we'll go over how to set up your system for keeping track of all the photos or slides or videos or bits of team kit or costumes or papers or whatever you're going to take in your collection. And we will introduce a spreadsheet that's designed to help you keep track of everything you receive. So you can just work from that. So I've pulled just a screenshot here of part of the spreadsheet that we provide in the toolkit. So first of all, you'll notice there's different tabs along the bottom, tab 1, tab 2, tab 3. Tab 1 is what you're using in chapter 2. So this tab provides a checklist of steps that we recommend you follow as you take in various material donations. And in chapter 2 there, we walk you through precisely how to do that. So when we were talking with the Marlborough Ale Committee, as Pat mentioned, one of the things that really was most important to them was that we capture people's stories of the ale over the years. They really felt that that's what best told the story of the ale over its 50 years. So this chapter is about doing just that, really capturing people's stories, memories, perspectives. If you're planning to do that as part of your collection, you'll be recording conversations with various people who have some part of that story to tell. So in chapter 3, we've entitled it Recording Conversations. We'll talk about recorded conversations as a particular type, a special type of donation to your archival collection. Sorry. We're also going to talk about ways to do that successfully. There are better ways and worse ways, as we learned ourselves as we worked through these steps. And then we'll also talk about how to store all the resulting audio, video, and image files that you get from those recordings. So again, let's see, here we go. So we've got this color-coded checklist that we provide in tab 2 that's to support this chapter. So again, you have 3 videos to go through. You'll have an introduction, background information, and the how-to video. You'll be here in tab 2 that corresponds to this chapter on interviews, and then you'll see this color-coded little checklist that walks you through these different steps, from making the recording to gathering permissions, to storing your recording, creating a transcript, and then finally creating backup files. That's all part of that chapter. Okay, then moving on to chapter 4, the next step you move into is organizing your collection. And we'll talk about how to make things easy to find. Things need to be easy to find for you and also easy to find for whoever's using your collection. So to do that, we've actually drawn on professional archival practices, of course, to provide some guidelines about effective ways to organize the material. And we'll talk you through that, hopefully in a very user-friendly, non-jargony way. And again, here in this chapter, you're going to start to use tab 3 in the spreadsheet. It's a little bit different than the previous tabs because this part of the spreadsheet is not a checklist. This is where you're actually going to be storing searchable information about each of the items in your collection. This is in effect the index of everything that you have in your collection and what you want to know about each of the items. So in tab 3, we talk about how to track this information, including what information is really essential to have versus information that might be nice to have, but maybe not essential. So creating all this information that people can use to search through your collection can really be one of the most time-consuming parts of creating your collection. So you can really decide how in-depth you want to go with this part of the process. And again, we'll talk to you a lot about that in chapter 4. Chapter 5. Now in chapter 5, we're going to talk about making your collection searchable. And we'll talk about how to accurately and sufficiently label the material so that your collection is easy to search. So as we said here, the list of searchable information that you provide can be as long, really, or as short as you want. So we're going to guide you through decisions about what information to provide to your users, as well as how and where to provide them with that information. For example, we'll be talking about what kind of search terms will you be using. We'll talk about what your options are for you so that you can choose. We'll also talk about the importance of consistency. We'll also talk about your choices for where to provide any searchable information to users of your collection. You know, that's going to depend on what kind of materials in your collection and how you've decided to store it. So we delve into all of that there. We'll also provide some guidelines on the different ways that you can make your collection available to your community. So back in chapter 1, in that very, very first planning chapter, one of the questions we ask you to start thinking about is, where do you want your collection eventually to live? Is it going to be on your team website? Is it going to live with a local historical society? Is it going to go live at a local college or university? Is it going to stay in someone's home? You know, all of those are possibilities. So in chapter 5, we'll also talk about the steps that go along with any one of those decisions. Okay, then the last chapter, chapter 6, is all about caring for your collection. So once your collection is complete, this happened with us too, and you've got it stored with a member of your organization, or you've got it all posted online or donated to some other organization for safekeeping, and you feel like you just go on and go, great, that's done, it's finished, it's out there for the world. You're not actually quite all the way done. So there's actually a little bit more to do in the future so that your collection remains available to those who want to use it. They'll be happy to hear this is a short chapter. There's not a lot to do, but there's a couple of things to really keep in mind. So in chapter 6, we'll go over what to do for your collection once it's complete. So the chapters are not all different sizes. Some of them are longer, some of them are much shorter. But we really have tried to give you the information you need to make choices all along the way so that you can kind of create the kind of archiving project that you feel fits your organization and is manageable for you to do. All right, so now I'm going to turn this back over to Pat, and we're going to take a little bit of time to hear from our field testers. So, Pat, over to you.
Great. I know it sounds a little overwhelming, but I think, there's been throwing a lot of information at you all at once, but, it's really a very, very logical step-by-step process. And, you can go as quickly or as slowly as you want to. You don't have to do it in a month. In fact, it could take much longer than that and just be a really engrossing and fascinating process for you and your organization. So now we talked earlier about the process of creating the toolkit and taking the very wise advice from Katie and Joanna to do a field test. And that took a year or almost a year. And we checked in with our field test teams chapter by chapter. And when we selected the teams, we gave them an opportunity to choose how they wanted to interact with the material we were giving them. One was to actually do the work that was outlined in the toolkit, and with either a small group of items or everything that they wanted to collect, go through the steps as we gave them the chapters. Or we thought we would also give them the opportunity to perhaps just read along while not actually collecting. So all of the teams were in various stages of archiving their history of their teams, but none of them had yet completed, by now, they have not yet completed using the whole toolkit. I hope that Larry from Minnesota Traditional Morris is among the people here, because we are going to turn things over to him. Awesome.
Now,
hi, Larry.
Let me see if I can pin Larry here. There we go. Okay, there we go.
We're still seeing Susan.
You are. You're not seeing Larry. You're just seeing me, are you?
Yeah.
I think once Larry speaks, it'll switch over to him.
Okay,
Well,
great.
let's try that out. Does this work? If I speak here,
You are.
have I
Awesome.
been popping up there now?
Yeah, you are.
Also, if you have, maybe it's the way your view is set up too.
No, you're showing Larry.
Okay.
And we had sent Larry and the other reps from Sound and Fury a few questions to think about. Um, and maybe you can start by telling a little bit about Minnesota Traditional Morris and your involvement in it, and then start telling us a little bit about the material you have and your intentions or plans to archive it.
Okay. Minnesota Traditional Morris was founded, well, I can't think of the exact date, but in the mid 1970s. Ed Stern, who had started Morris dancing in Chicago, had come to Minnesota to do postdoctoral work and um, gathered some people together. And very quickly, um, we started dancing as a team out at the Renaissance Festival that was beginning in the Twin Cities area out near Shakopee. And that has been a steady part of our tradition every year. 7 weekends out at that Renaissance Festival, but it has also given us the wherewithal to travel as a team 5 times to England and to other places. New Zealand last year. We have a team. I'm not going this time around, but a team going to England this coming year. So that's been a really positive part of our development. Ed Stern is still dancing with the team. He has um, on his own, he's very concerned with uh, saving elements of our team and has sort of begun that in a groups IO um, um, virtual gathering of information. How much of it he has kept of the original matter, and that I'm not sure of. I think he has. And some materials, for instance, from Arthur Knowles, one of the early founders of the team and departed now, his stuff that was, that are materials, those have been photographed and archived in that. But what we were excited about as we went into that is that all of this material is in a different kind of a format, and that this particular toolkit may give others of the team a way to enter that material and add to it to develop certain things. So I talked with David um, um,
Fields.
Fields.
yeah, David Fields, who had been for 3 years our squire. He is no longer. He said, "No, I didn't. I forgot all about it. I'm not going to come to this tonight." But that he has an intention of perhaps taking this forward specifically because looking at that idea of being specific about the application, specifically to pull together materials of our travels in England
Oh,
and in other places, but primarily the travels to England in that respect. So, what we have not done is actually get involved into that. Another group of us started collecting some stories and writing them down in short form essay kind of projects. I was part of that. I'm thinking, well, maybe that could morph into some other project. So those are the things that we have looked at, and I think we have kind of been away from the toolkit and have not moved forward. But I think David is now in a position, and I'm glad this has come up, says, because it sort of puts a new impetus to it. Are there any questions? I'm not sure I said everything I need to, but
Well, Larry, I wondered if there were one or two things from the toolkit that you found particularly useful in your thinking about preserving the history of your team.
um, I I think that the offering of the structure, um,
The
oh,
spreadsheet,
spreadsheets, yes.
yeah.
You don't want to reinvent the wheel, and these are much more. There's a lot more professional knowledge behind it than we would ever do if we were pulling toward it. I think that Temple, I think he was involved somewhat, and
Yeah.
from his work in computer, just generally his work has been with computers. He was excited to see the structure that brought to this kind of a project.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Larry, for taking time today to share your thoughts with us. And now we're going to turn it over to Jane Hecht and Dan Sabbath, who are members of Sound and Fury Morris in Seattle, Washington. And Jane and Dan really took this project to heart. I would say they took it far enough that they were creating goals. They were talking about their vision. I don't know what work you've done since then, but it was very exciting for Susan and I to really experience that with you as we were going through the field test. So Jane and Dan, do you want to start by telling us a little bit about Sound and Fury Morris and your roles on the team?
Absolutely. We're both in the same room, so you might see me talking as Jane, but she's right.
Next to each other.
Sound and Fury Morris has been around for 26 years. It was founded in 1999, so it's a fairly young team, by Dave Seeloff, a transplant from the Midwest. He was on the Braggarts and then came up here via California and landed here in Seattle and started a Morris team amongst the other Morris teams that are here. I've been a member of this side since 2003, so I'm one of the longer generation on the side. Since we are a fairly young team, as they go, I suppose. We've been digital for a long time, so that has impacted a lot of what we're thinking about in terms of like archiving and whatnot. Both of us have served as Squire for considerable lengths of time, and we're both invested deeply in telling the story of Sound and Fury and more about managing the next transition. We actually are transitioning right now. We've had a lot of older members. We also have an influx of young members who don't have the story of the side. And as a result, we really do want to gather what has come before, as well as what will build us to go on for another 25 years.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt for a moment? I'm wondering if there's any way that we can see Dan while he's talking.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Thank
Oh,
you.
Sorry. Or you,
Sorry, I have pinned both their screens so I could see both of
okay,
them.
you
But
can see
if you
both of
guys
us.
it'll
can't,
work.
This is
Yeah.
fine. We can just
Yeah.
lean in.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank
So,
you.
So Jane Hecht here. I've been on Sound and Fury since 2019, though I've been Morris dancing much longer than that. We really enjoyed working through this toolkit. It got our creative juices flowing. I honestly think that planning journal at the very beginning was one of the most useful nuggets. I mean, there were questions in there that we hadn't even begun to think of, but it kind of helped us narrow down and define what we hoped to do.
Right.
So up until this point, we wrote a mission statement and a description of the project. We've defined the scope. We've set up the framework, and Dan's put together a beautiful organization for it on our Google Drive site, all nicely organized of what we plan to collect and how we'll organize it. And we presented this all to the team at our last AGM, and there is enthusiasm. So
Yay.
that's good news.
let's see.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that we're going to work on actually is leaning into technology. So as Jane mentioned, we've got the Google Drive. This is something that you can get if you're a member of CDSS, and which means you're a 501c3. Google will give it away for free. And so we use that really, really heavily to organize our team business, but we're also organizing our archives there.
And we, as Dan was saying, a lot of our history is digital, and we've made a decision not to really archive and keep physical items. So, the kit through the years, or fools, or whatever memorabilia, we'll photograph it and it'll appear somewhere in the archive, but we're not going to permanently fill someone's closet with all these physical things. So.
Yeah. So how did you find working with the toolkit? Was everything straightforward? Did you come up against roadblocks?
It's a beautiful thing. Thank you for designing it.
Thank you.
I mean, the spreadsheet, as we saw, but really the chapters that describe how to use each tab. I really enjoyed the chapter on how to conduct interviews. I haven't really done that, and there were a lot of points in there that I wouldn't have thought of till I'd screwed up on 10 or so. So that was a very useful chapter.
Yeah. So do you have plans right now? You say you've created, your vision and mission. You've shared it with the team. They're enthusiastic. What are you planning to do next?
Well, one of the things we're planning on doing is actually doing a group interview of all of some of the members who've left. I mean, we have contact with them, so we want to get them together in a pub or someplace where we can actually get a good recording, but also enjoy libations of the cider variety, to have a conversation and try to elicit those stories. We think that sort of the group memory is going to be some of the best to, like, hey, do you remember those times? That's going to make it a little hard to do the transcript, but we'll figure it out. And there's a lot of transcription tools that are quite useful in that regard.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're really looking forward to that, sort of an old timers reunion, and just sit down and have the conversation of the stories and the remembrances. I think it's going to be good for the team too, for a lot of other reasons.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us while you're on the screen?
Can I just jump in with one thing that you guys reminded me of? And that is the whole question of transcripts and whether they're worth creating. Some people said, well, can't you just sort of caption all your interviews, especially if they're video interviews? And I think, Dan, you were one of the people that pointed out to us that it made it really nice to go back if you wanted to search through a transcript for something, having a text version of the interview made it really easy to sort of search for different things or to go to a certain part of the interview. So we had suggested including them simply as an accessibility kind of thing, but it actually can also serve nicely as a search tool. And I think you helped us think about that.
Thank you. I would also add that they're not hard to get. There are a lot of tools out there. If you've got a video, you can drop it into a tool called Notebook LM, which will do the transcription for you. You can play the recording back to a lot of even things on your phone that will transcribe remarkably well, like way better today in the last 2 years than it was like even 5 years ago. So
Right.
lean into your tool set so you don't have to like do the drudgery.
Right.
So I think I'm going to thank you, Dan and Jane. We really enjoyed working with you too. You were so enthusiastic, and as well with the other members of the field test teams from Ringabells and from King Sessing. I'm sorry they couldn't join us today, but thank you and Larry for adding your insight to the toolkit. I'm going to pass it back to Susan, I think.
All right, I'm going to see if I can go back here to sharing my screen. Are you guys seeing the slide?
We're seeing your version. We're not seeing the slide.
Dear, let me do that again. How about now?
Brilliant. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, well, I would next like to talk about an opportunity coming up this fall that CDSS is going to make available. So we've designed the toolkit really to be a do-it-yourself, and it can be, absolutely, and you can just work through it on your own. But if this is something you would like to do with some guidance, we're going to put together a cohort of folks who are interested in doing that in the fall, and then do a series of 4 workshops. And the idea right now is that we'll have 4 different online meetings that we're imagining will be about 90 minutes each. You can see the 4 months that we're kind of aiming for there. Pat and I will be your guides as you work through the toolkit in real time. So the idea is each 90-minute session, you'll have done something with the toolkit before we meet. And the first half of that session, we'll review what you've done. We'll share any thoughts or tips and ideas from me and Pat, but mostly it will give you a chance to talk to each other also about what you're trying, what's working, what's not working. And then the second half of the session will preview what's coming next. And then again, you'll sort of go away, you'll do sort of a next chunk of the toolkit. We'll come back together the next month and do the same thing over again. So we've kind of spread out the steps of it so that you'll be doing some work outside those meetings on your own to work through each part of the toolkit, and then we'll do kind of a wrap up in February. So we think this could be really fun and interesting. It's a little bit like what we did with our field test teams, but we'll be doing it in a little bit more depth. One of the other things I wanted to mention as you're thinking about your use of the toolkit and whether you want to join in on this fall cohort or not, is that, and I think Larry mentioned this, that you can just take a part of your historical materials. Like, let's say you just decide we're just going to take, all our videos or something, or all our photos, and just go through the steps of the toolkit with one part of your historical, potentially archival materials. In a sense, it's almost nicer to do it with a smaller chunk of things first and get to know what all the steps are and figure out what you want to do and what you don't want to do for your collection. And then you can always go back and do a second pass through your collection with more of your material with a clearer sense of exactly how you want to tackle this. So that's one way you can slice it. Or I think, as Larry mentioned, David's thinking about focusing on the team's trips to England. So you could choose almost like a theme and say, we're going to do all our photos and videos and whatever that's related to our trips to England or to our 25th anniversary or to whatever kind of theme you want to pick. So that's another way you could kind of slice off a piece of your historical material, go through the toolkit with just that subset of stuff, and get a better sense of how you want to shape this project for yourself. So there are ways to do that. All right. I think we are. Go ahead, Matt.
Susan, I'll just add that we don't quite have all the details on that cohort pinned down yet, but we will be promoting that in our newsletter, our affiliate newsletter, and we will send out a special notice to everyone that's registered on this call because you do have this special interest. So stay tuned for those details.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. I forgot to mention that. Okay, I think we are ready to open it up to questions, and we hope we'll have some answers, but I'll turn this off.
We
And
did have an initial earlier question. Chris Caldwell, I don't know if you want to speak on this now. Written in the chat was sort of a question about having a collection from a, a now disbanded Morris side. You know, you obviously you wouldn't have the community involvement piece as strong in that situation.
right, and is the question about kind of how to go about it if the team's no longer together?
Yeah, apparently Chris has been holding on to this and not really sure what to do with it.
Sure, sure. Well, this is, I suppose it's a chance to kind of reach out to former team members and find out who are the folks who are interested in diving into this kind of project. Sometimes teams will have an official historian, but more often it's kind of an unofficial role. There's just someone who really liked keeping track of all the old stuff and has kept it at their house for a while. They can often be a person who wants to dive in and do this. Yeah, so you can decide that you're going to sort of take it on behalf of the team. There's nothing that says you have to do it in a small group. It can be a one-person operation, but with the number of steps that are involved, it is nice to have a small group of people. For instance, oh gosh, I think it's in chapter 5 or 6, we talk about the fact that it's nice if you have someone who likes dealing with the public, who can be out talking to everybody about this project that you're working on and kind of doing your PR about it with your community. It's nice to have someone who likes dealing with information and who just likes tracking all the little bits of information that come in, organizing it, keeping track. You're sort of the organizers in your group. It's also nice to have someone who, if you're going to do recorded conversations, who's really interested in kind of an oral history approach. And those are very different skill sets. So sometimes you might want to pull together a little team, if you can, of 2 or 3 or 4 people and spread those skill sets out across the people you're assembling. So even if you could gather a small team like that, it would make the job a little easier.
I agree with Susan. You know, it's always more fun too. Working with a small group of people, share the workload and not feel like it's an onerous task. You want to continue to have fun with it, I think.
Right.
We've
Any
got
other questions?
yeah, Carol Moore has her hand raised. Carol,
Carol.
you'll unmute.
Hi, so this is amazing. I've been thinking about with our Ann Arbor Morris 50th anniversary coming up also, and having boxes in the basement full of material and feeling very overwhelmed about, you know, what to do, what to try to keep, what to try to organize. And this sounds like just such a sane way of bringing order to this. But another thing I've thought about a lot as I've contemplated this project is some kind of a product that kind of distills it in some way. So like makes
Yeah.
it, because the user of all this work is not necessarily going to be somebody who's writing their doctoral thesis on it 30 years from now. It might be someone from a newspaper or magazine who's never even seen a Morris dance, who wants to know a little bit about this community group. Or we're thinking about maybe having a tour and making up some kind of a little booklet celebrating, Ann Arbor Morris 50th anniversary, and here's something to read a little bit about our team and our history with the community in that. So that's a kind of a deliverable that you didn't mention, and I'm wondering if it's been thought about.
That's a great question, Carol.
Yeah.
Sort of what kind of little deliverable or distillation can you make of your collection for those who are just lay people looking at it? So in the archives world, it's typical to create something called a finding aid, which is basically just like a written guide to the collection. And so if I build off of that, if you were to think about, this could be in print form, it could be in video form, it could be in a variety of different forms, kind of a short overview of your collection, like maybe a little, think about like a paragraph's worth description of your team, another paragraph's description of here's the kind of stuff we've got in our collection, and then maybe another paragraph or two, or I've often thought about if you were going to kind of sit down over a beer with somebody and say, oh, let me tell you about the coolest things we have in our collection, kind of the special highlights from it that you would want to make sure somebody saw if they looked at your collection. And then just some kind of little short list that can be as generalized or as detailed as you want about, here's examples of some of our stuff that's in it.
Another kind of deliverable is think about what audience you're going to be talking to. So I'm thinking one of the most important audiences would be people who are interested in joining your team. So people who saw you dance, super curious, and when you're talking with them, you say, here's a little bit more about what the heck Morris is, what we as a team have done, what our activities are. And I don't know, you could produce something to give to each prospective new team member, that kind of, just a little handy booklet or something like that.
Yeah, could even be sort of, here's a short history of our team, and here's what we think makes us distinctive. Here's sort of the personality of our team, and here's some little snippets from our history that show that.
Yeah, what our goals are, the kind of people who you meet. And, we're talking about Morris teams right now, but really it's any kind of organization might be interested in welcoming new members this way by giving people a chance to learn about the history of the organization and the activity that they might be joining.
Sounds like something that might kind of emerge organically from looking at the collection as a whole.
Absolutely.
Right.
I'll also add that if you are ever doing any fundraising, this kind of thing is perfect for sort of building your case for support, telling your history, telling your story, helping people sort of frame it as sort of why this matters so much.
Good point. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have any other pointed questions? Could be about the cohort, could be about the toolkit, or
Oh, yeah.
simply.
Donna, thank you. Donna McLeod said you can also do a year in the life of with pictures and explanations and links to websites and videos. Great idea. Great idea.
Joe, it looks like Joe has his hand up.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you for this toolkit, for sharing it, and for your time and explanation. I've just become a secretary of a traditional music and dance group, and I wouldn't say struggling. I'm struggling, but I'm trying to figure out some of the more mundane stuff of archiving, like minutes, maybe flyers that are for activities we've done, financial stuff. And currently, we have physical stuff. I have, 3 or 4 big notebooks full of minutes. We have Google Drive where the same minutes are there, and so forth. And even on my laptop, I have most of the similar files. So I'm wondering, for archiving, is it best to have 3 or 4 ways of archiving? So if one goes away, you have the other 3, for instance. And then also for the future, when someone else becomes secretary, what is the best way to archive so that it can be passed along appropriately without losing? So I can see how the toolkit certainly can help me with historic things, pictures, videos. But what about the more mundane type things you have to do every month?
Sure. Great question. You asked if there's sort of more than one way to archive, and I would say absolutely yes. So the fact that you've got binders of minutes, that's great. Paper is so much easier to archive than digital files. A lot of people think that digitizing everything and keeping track of things digitally seems easier. But if you think about how often digital formats become obsolete and get replaced by new ones, when you have a lot of digital archives, you're constantly having to keep an eye on that. If people remember old WordPerfect documents, nobody writes in WordPerfect anymore. It's Word documents are now PDFs, things like that. So it's great to have things digitally because it makes access really easy. But a backup of a paper copy, if you've got a paper copy as well, it's a great idea to hang on to those. In terms of an organizational structure that you can pass on to someone else, there's no really one best answer. Really, the best answer is do a system that works for you and is clear, and just be as consistent as you can in the way you do it. And then just leave somebody a short description of how you organized it. And then people will be able to follow that. And most oftentimes people do not want to reorganize a whole collection to fit the way they think about it. If it's done in a structured way that's understandable, people will happily stick with that and just kind of maintain that structure. Did I hit all your questions, Joe?
I believe so. I am concerned about digital because even as robust as Google Drive may be, they could have an electrical failure and everything.
Right. Oh, good point. So always having your digital files backed up on some kind of separate little hard drive. You can, go to Staples and buy little many terabyte hard drives and just save your digital files on those as well, so that, if something ever happened, Google's not the only place that your digital files are living.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to add that we do talk about preservation of both and backup. Preservation of physical items and how best to do that. And we also talk about, the levels of backup that we suggest are most sensible. I also wanted to talk a little bit about something that came up during the toolkit with the field test is that people were concerned about large physical items and what they were going to do with them. And so we tried to give people suggestions about the kinds of places that might help, where you might send those things to be preserved appropriately. For the Marlborough Morris Ale Archive, it's up online, of course, and we have lots of original things, and those are going to be preserved at Vermont Folklife. So we were very fortunate to have an organization, a folk-related organization that was interested in receiving those materials. But it's just sort of a heads up for everyone who has physical items that this is sometimes the most difficult question to answer. Where are we going to store them? That's it.
We had a
Yeah,
question
Katie remembered, does anyone remember microfiche?
Right.
Yes. Right.
We've got a question sort of on the education bent about sort of preserving like what tunes and choreography are being used in the present day, I guess, sort of to educate current or new members.
Oh, I see. I'm thinking about learning aids for new folks. My first hope is to get a handle on all of the tunes we use, if not transcriptions, at least recordings. For the choreography, we have the names of the figures written down, but videos of how we do the figures would be very helpful in settling arguments at practice. So true. Are there tips for collecting these? I think the main tip would be figure out a system you want for organizing them. So do you want to organize, I would assume you would organize by, dance and then have tune, choreography, rather than sort of putting all the, I don't know. There's probably ways you could organize it where you could sort and either look at all the tunes together or all the choreography, or you could sort it by dance. But I would say paying attention to stuff we talk about in chapter 4 around organizing would be the way to go. And again, with organizing, there's never one right way to do it. It's kind of whatever makes most sense to the people who are taking on the organization of it. But then it's just your job to communicate how that organization of the materials is structured so that people can use it to find stuff.
I have a question from Katie about connecting future audiences with collections once they've been established.
Archives that want to be connected or help people find these collections once they are established. Oh, yes. This is a tricky question. At least in the US, as I went through archives grad school, you would think that there would be a lovely big index somewhere of archival collections in the US and where they are housed. To my knowledge, that does not quite exist yet. So, archival collections end up in different places. A lot of them will end up at colleges or universities. Colleges or universities will often choose what they call a collecting theme. For instance, a lot of people I think may know about the University of New Hampshire, which has a bunch of collections related to traditional music and dance, and they've established what they call the Library of Traditional Music and Dance. Some states like Vermont have folklife organizations. I know Texas has one. I know Vermont has one. I know there's only a handful of states that do, and I'm sorry, I don't know all the states that have them. So it's kind of a matter of checking around. You can sometimes just Google archival collections about something or other, and you can find where they are. Let's see, I'm looking back at your question, Katie. How do we ultimately connect archives that want to be connected? Well, and archivists often, if they know about related collections, they will often put pointers to other collections next to a description of a particular collection. They'll say, you know, for example, when we did the Marlborough Morris Ale collection, some people may know of Tony Barrand. Tony was a Morris dancer, heavily involved in the Marlborough Ale, and every year he would video all the show dances. His collection of videos of all those show dances have now been donated to the Library of Congress. So the Marlborough Ale collection can't have those, but we can point to people to that collection and say, we've got this part of information about the ale. See also those collections over there. And a lot of archival organizations will do that. So they can help point you to other related similar kinds of things. But unfortunately, there is not like one big, beautiful clearinghouse of all that information. So.
Although there is a very wonderful organization called the Country Dance and Song Society, which I think may have a role. I don't want to be too forward, but may have a role in, you know, connecting the different teams, organizations, or dance organizations, song organizations who are involved in this work, and maybe help create some kind of network so they can start talking to one another.
That sounds like a wonderful future goal, Pat,
Future goal.
and totally in line with our mission.
Exactly. Once a CDSS staff member, always.
Always. Just going back through the comments, I'm also going to just highlight another one here. Donna McLeod, thank you. The Library of Congress has a rather brilliant worksheet on personal archiving that goes through a lot of the practical questions involved in the more mundane day-to-day record keeping and organizing. And Donna put a link there in the chat. So at 9:13 p.m. if you want to look that up there. Great. Any other thoughts from people?
There is there an index of archives at CDSS? I don't know.
Not that I'm aware of. Not yet.
We don't have a comprehensive listing of all archives. I think, you know, as a sector, a subsector of the arts community, I feel like we're all just dipping our toes into this right now. So I feel like this is an area where we can really grow and develop over the next, you know, decade or so, as more and more groups hit anniversaries or have significant transitions. I would love for CDSS to be a place where researchers and future practitioners can go to dive in and see how things are done differently in different places. I would say that's definitely a more achievable goal the more support we have. So become an affiliate, become a member, help us continue this work. But yeah, I think that's great.
I'll also add that the American Folklore Society, I believe, is based at the University of Indiana.
Yes.
And they would be a great resource. If anyone would have sort of at least a start of folk-related archives, they would be a place to go and look first. Canada, I'm not sure if Canada has a similar kind of place, but that would be worth finding out about.
Rhett Krause, when he was doing the research for his book about Morris dancing traditions on this continent, I know he connected with Brasstown and Berea and UNH, and I think he reached out to Indiana. So yeah, I think this is an area we could start collecting some information on and help people explore what's out there and what's possible.
We applaud that.
Yes.
Well, if we don't have any further pointed questions, I certainly want to thank you, Susan and Pat, for this wonderful presentation. You can see very plainly by the chat that it's been well appreciated. And to all of you out there, I'm excited to share more details about the cohort in the fall once we get that sort of all lined up. And this has been recorded and will be available in the future off our website. So if you ever want to reference back. And while we're here, since it is newly on the website, I do want to relink everybody to the actual toolkit on our webpage. And I'll try to go through this chat and sort of distill some of the good links and wisdom that's come through, and hopefully be able to share that back out with you all.
Great, thank you.
And
Thanks,
as
Pat.
Katie said, become a member, become an affiliate. Everything helps in our charge to support all of these local organizations creating the magic and the joy that you all do.
Thank you all so much for coming tonight.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Have a good night. Bye now.
Bye now.